The cabin sat deep in the valley, wrapped in fog and silence, and everyone knew something strange was about to happen. This story promised answers, and by the end, the truth behind one reckless HOA decision would shock everyone watching. He had built that cabin to escape noise, not invite trouble. The valley was private land, untouched, protected by law and patience. For years, he followed every rule, filed every permit, paid every fee. Then came the HOA Karen. She believed power lived in her clipboard and authority followed her wherever she walked. She sent warnings, letters, and threats, claiming the cabin violated imaginary rules. He ignored them, knowing the law was on his side. But curiosity grew when her messages turned desperate, angry, and personal. One night, under the excuse of inspection, she crossed a line that could not be uncrossed. She broke into the cabin, convinced she would finally prove him wrong. What she didn't know was that the valley had a memory, and someone inside was waiting. The moment she pushed that door open, everything she believed about control, ownership, and fear was about to collapse. The air smelled of pine and rain, the kind that settles before consequences arrive. Her footsteps echoed like accusations, each one louder than the last, as the valley watched without mercy, preparing to reveal its truth. She had no idea this moment would follow her forever, changing how she understood power, law, and the price of crossing lines that were never hers to cross. The door creaked wider, and the valley held its breath, waiting for the first scream of truth. The moment she stepped inside, confidence drained from her face as reality replaced assumption. This video promised the truth, and now the truth stood in front of her, calm and unmovable. Inside the cabin stood a quiet figure, not angry, not afraid, simply waiting. It was a county water inspector, seated at the table with files spread wide. The cabin was not just a home, it was a monitoring station for the valley's water flow. The lake outside wasn't decorative or private for fun. It fed underground channels supplying clean water to nearby farms and emergency reserves. The man who owned the cabin had partnered with the county to protect it. When Karen demanded explanations, the inspector calmly asked why she had entered without permission. Her words tangled as authorities slipped through her fingers. She tried to claim HOA rights, but the inspector quietly recorded everything. The cabin owner returned, watching her realize that her break-in had been documented, witnessed, and logged. Outside, the valley looked peaceful, but inside, her future was cracking. She had expected to scare someone. Instead, she had walked into a legal storm, and the door closed behind her with finality. Silence filled the room, thick and heavy. The inspector explained the consequences without raising his voice. Laws were cited. Procedures outlined. Her power evaporated with every sentence. She stood frozen, trapped not by walls, but by the truth she never bothered to learn. News travels fast when arrogance meets consequence, and the valley began to whisper. This story promised a reveal, and the impact was only growing stronger. By morning, reports had been filed. The HOA board received calls they couldn't redirect. The Karen who once ruled meetings with fear now avoided phones and emails. The inspector confirmed the break-in triggered a security review of the entire HOA. The cabin owner remained silent, letting facts speak. He had warned them politely for years that the valley was protected. They laughed, dismissed him, and sided with noise over knowledge. Now, county officials reviewed HOA authority limits, uncovering patterns of intimidation and overreach. Residents watched board members panic as fines, audits, and resignations loomed. The Karen realized this wasn't just about a cabin. Her name was now attached to reports, footage, and statements. The valley stayed calm, but the community shifted. People started asking who truly protected them. As sunlight hit the lake, its surface reflected more than trees. It reflected accountability approaching fast, and she felt it closing in, step by step, with no escape left. Whispers turned into conversations. Conversations turned into action. The valley was done being controlled by ignorance, and the truth was no longer hiding. The HOA called an emergency meeting, and tension filled the room like heavy air before rain. The promise of this story was clear now, and the payoff was getting closer. Residents packed the hall, whispering, watching, waiting. The Karen sat stiff, avoiding eyes, while officials presented evidence. Footage showed her entering the cabin without consent. Documents proved the valley's water role. Every excuse collapsed under facts. The board tried distancing themselves, but responsibility doesn't disappear when ignored. The cabin owner spoke once, calmly explaining the partnership that protected everyone's water supply. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried weight. Faces changed as realization spread. This wasn't rebellion, it was preservation. The Karen tried to interrupt, but silence stopped her. The board announced immediate removal pending investigation. Gasps filled the room. Outside, the lake shimmered under daylight, untouched and patient. Inside, a chapter of control ended. The meeting closed with apologies, policy changes, and a promise to never confuse authority with entitlement again. The valley had spoken through truth, and everyone had heard it clearly. As chairs scraped back and doors opened, the weight of consequence followed her into the daylight, undeniable and permanent. Days later, the valley felt lighter, as if tension itself had drained away. This video promised closure, and the story moved toward it. Investigations confirmed the HOA had no jurisdiction over the cabin or lake. Fines were issued. Leadership changed. Residents apologized to the man they once doubted. He didn't celebrate. He simply returned to fishing, watching the water he helped protect. The Karen's name disappeared from emails and meetings, replaced by silence. She moved away quietly, reputation fractured by her own actions. The inspector completed his review, praising the cabin's role in keeping the valley safe. The lake remained clear, steady, alive. Children played nearby again. Neighbors waved. The valley returned to peace, but with lessons etched deep. Authority without understanding leads to damage. Protection requires humility. The cabin stood as proof that quiet responsibility outlasts loud control. Each ripple on the lake carried that message forward, reminding everyone that real power listens before it acts. And though the drama faded, its lesson stayed, rooted in water, land, and earned respect. The story did not end with cheers, but with understanding, and that made it stronger than any victory ever could. The valley breathed out, calm restored at last. End. Months passed, and the valley became a case study shared quietly among officials. This story promised impact, and its echo was undeniable. County workshops referenced the incident as a reminder of boundaries. New HOA leaders trained on cooperation, not control. The cabin owner received a letter of appreciation, framed but rarely mentioned. He preferred silence to praise. The lake continued feeding reserves, its surface reflecting seasons instead of conflict. Occasionally, hikers stopped to ask about the cabin. He smiled and told them it was just a place where listening mattered. The valley thrived because someone chose patience over pride. The story spread online, not as revenge, but as warning. People saw themselves in it, in small ways. The Karen became a symbol, not a villain, of unchecked certainty. The lesson wasn't about shame, it was about awareness. Power needs purpose. Rules need reason. And land remembers how it's treated. As autumn light touched the trees, the cabin stood unchanged, quietly guarding what mattered most. The valley didn't need fences. It had understanding now, and that was stronger than fear ever was. Stories like this linger not because of drama, but because they teach something real about community, responsibility, and respect. Lessons stay forever. The final truth settled like still water after a storm, clear and undeniable. This video promised a twist, and now every piece finally fit. The Karen never faced shouting or revenge. She faced something heavier, consequence. The valley didn't punish her, it revealed her. In the end, no locks were needed, no arguments raised. Truth did the work. The cabin remained, the lake flowed, and the community learned where real authority comes from. It comes from care, not control. From listening, not assuming. From protecting what serves everyone, not just ego. The man returned to quiet mornings, casting his line as sunlight danced on water. The valley stood patient, unchanged by human noise. Seasons would come and go, but the lesson would remain carved into memory. Communities thrive when humility guides decisions. Boundaries exist to protect, not dominate. The story ends without villains, only understanding, because growth begins when ego steps aside. The valley kept it secret until it was needed, then revealed it gently, teaching everyone who listened. Silence returned, not empty, but full of meaning and earned peace that no rulebook alone could ever replace. This ending wasn't loud, but it was true. Truth lasts. Always does, and that was the final twist in this unbelievable HOA story. If you love the drama, don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop a comment sharing your thoughts. It really helps this channel grow.